We can hire 4 interns for your salary, Max. Nothing personal, just economics. That line didn't come from some faceless executive. It came from Derek Stone, 39, the brand new COO at Aurex Dynamics, a cybersecurity firm in the heart of Austin, Texas. I was Max Rourke, 58, the senior architect behind every firewall, data tunnel, and AI threat detection system they ran. And now, I was being told I was too expensive to keep. It happened in a sterile glass conference room at 8:42 a.m. on a Thursday so early they probably thought I'd be too stunned to fight back. I wasn't. I looked across the table at Derek, with his carbon-neutral laptop and Patagonia vest, and said, "Is that all?" His smirk faltered. HR slid a beige folder across the table. 2 months severance, vacation pay, blah, blah, blah. They expected outrage, a scene, maybe even tears, but I just nodded and stood. Not because I was okay. I wasn't. I was furious and humiliated. But I was also finished. Not with the company with playing nice. For 17 years, I had kept Aurex safe from every cyber threat imaginable. When their servers were melting under DDoS attacks, I held the line. When hackers from 5 time zones tried to breach our internal systems, I outsmarted them in real time. I was being replaced by a cloud consultant named Ryan, age 25, who still used ChatGPT to write Python scripts. I left without saying another word. My work was packed in a cardboard box, a USB drive, and a fire that had just been lit inside me. They thought they were cutting costs. They were cutting off their oxygen. They thought I'd make a scene. Scream. Threaten lawsuits. I slammed the door on my way out, but instead I just stood there, straightened the cuffs of my shirt, and calmly asked, "Where should I leave my badge?" Derek blinked as the absence of drama confused him, and maybe it did. He leaned back, probably expecting defiance. Instead, I gave him indifference. I didn't feel calm, though. I felt hollow, like someone had just ripped out the center of everything I'd built and left the shell behind. But here's the thing they didn't understand. I wasn't calm because I was okay. I was calm because I was done. I walked out of that conference room with 18 years of knowledge no one else fully understood. No manuals. No handover documents. Just the memory of sleepless nights spent coding under pressure, architecting defensive layers no junior engineer could even begin to trace. And now they wanted to replace all that with cloud subscriptions and consultants fresh out of grad school. I passed the glass offices where people pretended not to look at me. Some flicked glances. Some stared at their monitors harder than ever, as if that would make them invisible. No one said a word. Fear had already started creeping into the building's bloodstream. At 9:10 a.m., I entered the elevator with a cardboard box and a badge left at reception. The Austin heat hit me like a wall when the lobby doors slid open. That morning I'd parked on level 3 of the underground garage. By the time I turned the ignition, I already knew one thing for sure. I was never coming back. Aurex wasn't always a cybersecurity empire. When I first joined, it was a struggling MSP startup operating out of a second-floor co-working loft above a Thai restaurant in East Austin. That was 17 years ago. They had 4 clients, 1 server, and a single Wi-Fi router duct-taped to the ceiling. The company's IT department was a whiteboard with the word firewall scribbled in red marker. Back then, the CEO was Harold Nix, a sharp, scrappy founder who didn't care about buzzwords, only results. After seeing my freelance portfolio, he hired me, shook my hand, and said, "Build us something that'll survive a war." So I did. Not overnight, not even in a year, but brick by brick, I created a multi-layered, AI-integrated, zero-trust security system that protected everything from local vendors to federal defense subcontractors. My code filtered over 1.3 billion packets a day. I designed redundancy schemes that made sure no single failure ever meant catastrophe. As the company expanded in clients, then 50, then hundreds across multiple time zones, did the system. But with each growth spurt, Aurex made the same decision. Documentation, Later. Let's ship now. They never hired documentation engineers. They never invested in full code mapping. And they were okay with that because I was still there. I knew every subroutine, like muscle memory. Every logic gate had my fingerprints. I kept it all in my head because they refused to write it. They called me indispensable. Until suddenly, I was a line item they could cut. And the wild part? I never made myself irreplaceable. They just never bothered to understand what I'd built. The unraveling didn't happen overnight. It started as a whisper barely noticeable. My request for a documentation team? Shot down again. Too costly, they said. Next quarter? That quarter never came. Then came the consultants. Polished kids in skinny suits flown in from New York with fresh MBAs and zero technical fluency. They talked in circles about scalability and cloud-native agility. But when I pulled up our proprietary network topology, their eyes glazed over like I'd spoken Latin. And then quietly I stopped getting calendar invites. No more dev roadmaps. No more strategy calls. I was being phased out without being told death by silence. My wife, Clara, saw it first. Over dinner, she said, "They're sidelining you. You need to prepare." I laughed it off, still believing logic and value would win. But they weren't ignoring me because I wasn't essential. They were ignoring me because I was too crucial. I had too much knowledge, too much control, and too many systems that couldn't run without me. And that's when the real threat became clear. They didn't want to understand what I'd built. They tried to erase it, so they could replace it with something cheaper, shinier, dumber. They thought they were upgrading. What they were doing was gutting the brain of the company. It started 2 weeks after I walked out. At 10:03 a.m., I was in my home office, updating my resume with one hand and sipping lukewarm coffee with the other, when my phone buzzed voicemail from Derek Stone. I didn't pick up. I didn't need to. His voice spilled out measured at first, but with that twitchy tightness behind the words. "Hey Max, just a quick one. It looks like the tenant access portal is experiencing some instability. The new team is having some trouble parsing parts of the legacy stack. I would love to hear your thoughts in just a few minutes." I let it rot in the inbox. By 2 p.m. I had 3 more missed calls. Derek, a panicked engineer named Corey. Even Maggie from HR hadn't spoken to me once during my exit. Messages got shorter, more urgent, less polished. By nightfall, Owen Me, former lead sysadmin, texted me directly. "Max, the system's been down all day. Maintenance logs aren't syncing. Derek spiraling." I didn't reply. The next morning my phone rang again. Maggie's voice cracked like glass. "We'd like to discuss a short-term consulting arrangement formally. Generous compensation. To stabilize a few things." I asked her how generous she was. $300 an hour. Minimum 4-hour blocks. Starting immediately. I told her I'd think about it and went back to watching the sun rise over the balcony, calm as ever. They thought I was replaceable. They thought they'd buried the old code with me. But they were finally learning, the hard way, that I didn't just build the system. I was the system. Every dependency, every contingency, every silent safety net that stopped the company from crashing. I had hand-woven it, line by line. And now, they were unspooling it, without a map, 3 days into the meltdown. While Aurex was still scrambling to duct tape a system they didn't understand, I received an email with the subject line, "Opportunity to talk, confidential." It was from Lena Voss, Connecticut O at Krypton Core Technologies, a mid-sized but rising cybersecurity firm headquartered in Denver. I'd heard the name before, quiet, steady players who never made headlines but always delivered. Lena didn't mince words. "We've admired your architecture at Aurex for years. We're expanding rapidly. And we're ready to build something, smarter something, built to last. Would you be open to a conversation?" That afternoon, we met via video call. Lena didn't waste time with fluff. She knew what she wanted. A system that wouldn't buckle undergrowth. Not a patchwork of plug-and-play tools, but a living infrastructure. I walked her through my approach: redundancy first design, deep layered firewalls, scalable segmentation with modular integrity. She didn't blink. She understood the language. And then she said it clean direct. Like a punch through the fog. We're offering you the role of Chief Systems Architect. Full autonomy, full support, 20% above your previous salary. Equity, your blueprint, your team. I didn't hesitate, because while Aurex was busy sending urgent emails and upping their desperation rate to $500 an hour, someone else had already seen my value before everything fell apart. They didn't want to fix a mess. They wanted to build something that wouldn't break in the first place. 2 days later, I signed the contract. That same evening, Derek called again from a blocked number. His voice cracked. Max, the database is spitting garbage. We lost 3 months of payment logs. Clients are threatening legal action. Please, just 2 days of your time. I didn't even let him finish. I'm employed elsewhere now. Exclusive contract. He begged. He offered double. I refused, because the truth is, I wasn't chasing a bigger paycheck. I was building something better, and they were finally learning the cost of what they'd thrown away. A week into my new role at Core, I stood before a whiteboard, sketching a next-gen modular firewall array, when my phone buzzed again. Blocked caller. Again. I let it ring. The voicemail dropped in less than 30 seconds. It was Derek's voice, stripped of authority, stripped of pride. Max, please. We've lost access to every payment record since January. Tenants are getting overcharged, some undercharged. The consulting firm can't make sense of your database logic. They're asking if you hard-coded custom indexes. Did you? Of course I did. That's how you optimize at scale. That's how you ensure performance across millions of requests a day. That's how you build for war, not weekend launches. I didn't respond. By now, I'd trained myself not to. But it didn't stop there. The following day, I got a call from Jill Carson, a name I hadn't heard since Aurex's early days. She was now one of their largest clients, running a financial SaaS platform for mid-size credit unions. She didn't call to catch up. Max, she said, cutting right to it. We've been told your systems are unstable, that there's a transition plan, but I've seen the error logs. I know your work. It's not the system, the idiot's trying to run it. That same night, I met Alan Whitaker, my former database admin, for lunch at a quiet Vietnamese spot on Austin's east side. He looked worn out, dark circles, nerves frayed. He didn't waste time. They're screwed, Max. It's worse than what you're hearing. Backup archives, corrupted, logging services, misconfigured. And guess what? The consultants can't find the audit trail because no one ever documented the access layer routines. You warned them. You begged for a documentation team. He leaned in and lowered his voice. And there's more. I found emails, internal ones. He opened his laptop and pulled up a folder marked Nexus Archive. Inside were threads between Derek and the Aurex board. Dates stretched back 6 months before I was terminated. Titles like Legacy Cost Optimization Strategy and Phase 1, Offboarding High, Value, Single Points. In bold, my name appeared again and again. They planned it, Max, Alan whispered. He promised them he could replace you with a cloud services package and a junior team in 6 months. Said you made the system intentionally convoluted. I stared at the screen, my jaw tight. One sentence from Derek's email stood out like a spotlight in a tunnel. Rourke's architecture is over-engineered by design. He's built an empire. Only he can run. Alan closed the laptop, and the board bought it. Hook, line, and ledger. I sat back, fingers steepled, heart hammering not with regret, but clarity. It had never been about the system's value. It had been about optics, politics, and a sale. They're prepping for acquisition, Alan added. I overheard Derek on a call with investors last month. He's trying to make Aurex look lean and agile. Stripped down, cloud ready. It's a fire sale in slow motion. And then he paused. I quit yesterday, he said quietly. I'm not the only one. Half the IT team's gone. The rest are hanging on by a thread. Aurex's biggest client, Juno Shield Security, is already moving its data out. You take them out of the equation, Aurex folds. I nodded. I took a breath. I looked out the window at the flickering neon signs across the street. And then, I asked the question Alan had been waiting for. You looking for something new? He grinned. You hiring? That same evening, I called Lena Voss. I told her about Alan. She didn't hesitate. Get him on a plane. I'll handle the paperwork. 3 days later, Alan was on board at Krypton Core. We were building something correctly documented, trained, distributed, and bulletproof. Meanwhile, Aurex was on fire. They brought in a third-party crisis firm, billed at $2,000 per hour. They specialized in legacy forensic recovery, translation, digital archaeologists digging through ruins. Another week passed. Then came the inevitable. Aurex's biggest account, Juno Shield, publicly terminated their contract. They issued a statement that made headlines in our industry. Due to unresolved technical failures, billing inconsistencies, and transparency concerns, we have severed all ties with Aurex Dynamics. Effective immediately. Stock dropped, investors panicked, and then, on a crisp October morning, an email arrived in my inbox. Subject: private discussion from the board of Aurex. They were reconsidering leadership. They deeply regretted how things ended. They were prepared to offer a reinstatement full salary, signing bonus, and unrestricted access to legacy code. They didn't get it. It was never about the money. It was about respect for the work. And the moment they stopped respecting it, that's when they lost everything. The collapse of Aurex was a warning. But for Krypton Core, it was an opening. Just 12 days after Juno Shield publicly dropped Aurex, Lena Voss walked into my office with that no-nonsense expression she wore when the stakes were about to change. Max, she said, I just got off the phone with Harper Lynn, CEO of Skybridge Partners. They're officially pulling their portfolio from Aurex. They're asking if we can absorb it. I froze. Not because I didn't see it coming. Because Skybridge managed over 8,000 endpoints across the US. Their infrastructure was massive, tangled, and sensitive. If we took that on, we'd be doubling Krypton Core's operational footprint overnight. We're not ready, I told her honestly. But could we be? She asked. That was the question. I spent the next 12 hours drafting our scaling blueprint, a modular integration model, hybrid cloud environment, intelligent load balancing, and zero downtime migration paths. I didn't sleep, barely blinked. Every lesson from Aurex, every failure, every missed investment in documentation, training, and testing, I flipped into the foundation of what Krypton Core 2.0 would be. The next morning, I slid the 22-page rollout plan across Lena's desk. This is what we need: 3 more senior engineers, dedicated infrastructure in 2 data centers, 8 weeks of staggered deployment, and non-negotiable documentation cycles from day 1. No shortcuts, no heroes. Every person must be replaceable. She read the proposal line by line. Then she looked up and said, Let's do it. We moved fast. Within 1 week, Alan built a real-time data mapping tool that could read, interpret, and restructure Aurex's broken architecture into our new schema. By week 3, we'd hired 5 new engineers, 2 of whom had just resigned from Aurex. I led the onboarding personally, not because I didn't trust them, but because I refused to let knowledge become tribal again. Every system we touched was diagrammed, versioned, and shared. Every line of logic came with a narrative. If someone got hit by a bus, the system would still breathe. This wasn't ego. It was anti-fragility by design. And then, just as the rollout for Skybridge's Eastern Division began, I got a knock on my door. Lena poked her head in. You're going to want to take this one, she said, nodding toward the main conference room. Inside sat Jeffrey Chang, CFO of Skybridge, and next to him, to my shock, Elliot Marsh, one of Aurex's founders. Max, Jeffrey said, standing to shake my hand. We've been following what you're building here, and frankly, it's what Aurex should have been all along. Elliot nodded. I left before they gutted everything. I watched from the sidelines. And when I heard you were leading things here, I knew Skybridge would be in safe hands. We didn't talk about the past. We didn't need to. Instead, we discussed the future data sovereignty zones, predictive threat models, and AI escalation protocols. They asked if Krypton Core could scale across 4 regional operations. I said yes, but only if we do it right. No short-term wins at long-term cost. I'm not your guy if you're looking for fast and cheap. Jeffrey leaned back and smiled. That's exactly why we're here. That was the turning point. From that day on, Krypton Core wasn't just growing, it was rising. Clients came to us because we didn't just build systems. We respected the architecture. We built with transparency. We built with succession in mind. By the end of the quarter, we had integrated 40% of Skybridge's network. By the end of the year, we were named one of the top 3 most resilient cybersecurity providers in the Western U.S. And Aurex? Their sales stalled. No buyers. Too toxic. Too broken. 1 year after my termination, Krypton Core acquired Aurex's remaining assets at 24 cents on the dollar. Code I had written. Systems I had protected. Rooms I had once worked in. The irony? I didn't feel triumphant. Just clean. Full circle. No need for revenge. No desire for, I told you so. Just the satisfaction of having built something the right way and watched it stand while everything built on ego crumbled. 6 months after Krypton Core absorbed Skybridge's final migration region, Lena called me into her office with a look that said, "You're not going to believe this." I walked in. She closed the door, dropped her phone on the desk, and leaned forward. "The board just approved it," she said. "We're acquiring Aurex." My heart didn't race. My jaw didn't drop. It just settled. Because deep down I'd known it was coming. The signs were everywhere: stock decay, client exodus, leadership reshuffling. Aurex was a sinking vessel, bloated with technical debt, and Krypton Core was now the only ship strong enough to carry its weight. But still, the words landed like gravity. "Effective next quarter," she continued. "The acquisition package includes all core systems, remaining contracts, and office leases, at a fraction of their last valuation." And then she added, "The board wants you to lead the integration." I didn't answer right away, because this wasn't just technical, it was emotional. I wasn't being asked to clean up a mess, I was being handed back the skeleton of something I once built, only to watch it be gutted by people who never understood its value. Under one condition, I said finally, "We do it right. No patchwork, no good enough, full documentation, end-to-end training, and no shortcuts, ever." Lena didn't even blink. Agreed. A month later, I stepped through the sliding glass doors of Aurex's old headquarters. The signage now reads Krypton Core Vertical Bar, Integrated Systems Division. The paint hadn't changed, but everything else had. I walked those familiar hallways with Lena at my side. Some faces avoided my gaze: engineers who had once bought into the modernization lie. Others looked relieved. And a few, Alan included, stood proudly beside me, veterans who knew precisely what it took to build something that worked. We reached the server room, my old domain. Through the glass, the blinking LED lights pulsed like a heartbeat. The same racks I'd specified. It's the same airflow system I'd optimized. The same cable color coding that everyone else had mocked but never questioned because it worked. "You want to go in?" Lena asked. I shook my head. "No need, we're migrating it all anyway." We gathered the remaining Aurex staff in the main conference room for a formal announcement. I stood at the front of the room, looking at a sea of half-familiar faces, some anxious, some bitter, some quietly hopeful. Lena introduced me as the Chief Integration Officer, tasked with bringing both systems under one roof. But more than that, I was there to restore the cultural DNA of something long lost: craftsmanship, clarity, and continuity. I spoke plainly. This isn't about patching what's broken. It's about building what should have been built from the start. Every system we migrate will be documented. Every team member will be trained. And no one will be left behind because of budget spreadsheets. The room was still. The irony of that last sentence wasn't lost on anyone. I wasn't there to say, "I told you so." I was there to say, "Let's do it right this time." Over the next 10 weeks, the transformation began. We tore out the crumbling code bases and replaced them with modular systems. Every decision was logged. Every migration phase was rehearsed. The entire engineering team went through rotational cross-training, so no single point of failure could ever take down the ship again. We weren't just fixing tech, we were rebuilding trust. 12 weeks later, on a clear fall morning, I received final approval from the board. Krypton Core was now the largest integrated cybersecurity provider in the Western U.S. That same afternoon, I walked into my office to find Justin Mahler, son of Aurex's founder, waiting at the window. He looked older than I remembered, but lighter, too. "My father asks about you sometimes," he said. "He's retired in Oregon now. He spends his days fly fishing and reading industry news." I smiled. Harold always did care more than he let on. Justin nodded. "He said something before he left. Said letting you go would be the dumbest decision Aurex ever made." I didn't respond. What could I say? He was right. But the truth was, I didn't need to hear that anymore. I wasn't chasing redemption. I wasn't seeking apologies. I had already found what I came for. Legacy, not ego. That evening, I stood alone outside the building, watching the city lights flicker across downtown Austin. The place where I'd once been discarded had become the foundation for something more substantial, cleaner, and smarter. And all I'd done was refuse to vanish. I never cared for titles. I never chased applause. But I paused when Lena stepped into my office with the board's final approval. It felt like something full circle. Not because I was surprised. "The education division is greenlit," she said. "You'll have full control curriculum, staff, rollout. It's yours." We'd talked about it months ago after the Aurex integration wrapped. I told her I wanted impact and wasn't looking for more power. Not just fixing systems, but training the people who build them. I teach engineers not only how to write code, but also how to write it with clarity, documentation, and long-term survival in mind. How to create systems designed to outlive them. That was the goal. So we built the Krypton Core Technical Fellowship, a mentorship program disguised as a division. I brought in veterans and coders from every walk of life. We didn't chase shiny tools. We taught process, thinking, and restraint. We taught how to build things right, and I didn't do it from a corner office. I sat in those classrooms. I walked students through legacy diagrams. I told them stories not about victory, but about failure, about hubris, about what happens when executives cut too deep, when companies forget that people, not platforms, hold the system together. One afternoon, I stood by the window overlooking downtown Denver. Autumn had rolled in, air crisp, golden light bending across glass and concrete. Alan stepped in with 2 coffees. "You think it'll stick?" he asked. I looked out at the training floor, dozens of young minds diving into system architecture with actual curiosity. "It will," I said. "Because we're not just teaching tech. We were teaching respect for complexity, for craft, for legacy. It wasn't revenge that built this. It was endurance. The quiet kind. The kind that stays when everyone else walks away. I never wanted to prove them wrong. I just wanted to build something they could never break again. And now? Now I had. Looking back, I realized this was never about losing a job, it was about reclaiming something more profound. My voice, values, and standards. It's easy to feel small when people with power decide you're no longer convenient. It's tempting to shrink, justify, and beg for a second chance. But sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is walk away with dignity and let the silence speak for you. If there's one thing I hope you take from this story, it's this. Your experience matters. Your integrity matters. And how you build things, systems, teams, even your reputation matters more than most people realize. They called me expensive, but what they meant was that I cared too much to cut corners. And eventually, They paid the price for every shortcut they celebrated. So wherever you are starting, rebuilding, or standing at your crossroads, don't let others rush your process or discount your depth. Build things that outlast the moment. Document what you create. Teach what you know. And never forget, when you're being replaced, it may feel like the end. But if you've built something the right way, it's only the beginning.